to the motherfucking invitation. That's right. Lamb of God are back with their 10th studio album, Into Oblivion. And this is an invitation to my thoughts on the album. I mean, let's face it, the band have achieved pretty much everything worth achieving in the world of rock and metal. They've amassed billions of streams on Spotify, sold millions of copies worldwide of their albums. They've headlined pretty much every festival worth headlining, and they come to the UK this summer as the headline Bloodstock open air on the Friday night. And they've even started their own festival, the Headbangers Vote. I mean, how many bands can say they've done that? So yeah, their impact on the world of metal cannot be understated. Also, it makes you think, yeah, where do they go from here in their 10th studio album? Even guitarist Mark Adler stated that there's nothing out of bounds for the band from a creative point of view, or words to those effect. So that kind of hints that maybe the band are maybe losing a bit of that creative spark, that creative fire. So yeah, where do they go? It's interesting because they said they just wanted to, lock themselves away in the studio when write things that feel good, very succinctly and concisely put there, without the external pressures of record labels and I guess society and things that take away from that creative drive. Also, to appreciate where you are as a musician, sometimes you've got to step back and look at where you've come from. And it's interesting because Randy Blythe talks about how some bands are losing that kind of regional identity. Back in the 80s, we had the likes of the Bay Area scene, Metallica, Slayer, those kind of bands. The late 80s, the Tampa Bay scene, Death, Cannibal Corpse, Obituary. In the New York scene, in the northeast of the USA, like the Suffocation, Internal Bleeding, Immolation coming through. Again, they all had unique sounds and an identity really tied to their region. And in this album, Lamb of God said they wanted to look into that Richmond, Virginia scene of the 90s, bands that inspired them before they became a band. So yeah, it'll be interesting how this creative approach manifests on Into Oblivion. Well, the album kicks off with Into Oblivion, the album's title track, and it really is such a forceful statement. I mean, the guitars are really heavy, but they're quite inviting and melodic at the same time. It's that kind of melodic death metal edge that Lamb of God have had for many years. The rhythm section sounds tight as anything as well, and you'll notice Randy Blythe's vocals, they sound fierce as ever. He's showing no signs of wear and tear in his old age now, well, older age. And yeah, if you compare his vocals on this album to what he's done in previous work, the likes of Ruin, As the Palaces Burn, yeah, you won't really notice any difference, which is it's a real mark to his longevity and his brilliant technique over the years. Then they shift gears and really pile on the pressure with Parasocial Christ, and this is an absolute bruiser of a track. It's barely 3 minutes long, and there's no fancy introductions. It just gets straight into the action, and it's a similar spirit and feel to all the songs, like again As the Palaces Burn. And it's just, I loved it. it's it's an absolute bruiser of a track, and I'm pretty sure it's going to cause absolute chaos when they play it live. Saying that though, you can't really subject yourself to that fast-paced intensity for 40, 50 minutes. You'll just burn yourself out. That's why they got songs like El Vacío and Sepsis, which are slower, more bruising, marauding, and even quite sludgy at times. Especially with El Vacío, which is quite melancholic at times. It's really necessary for the overall pacing of the album. And yeah, it just gives you a breather, but you can hang headlong if you really want to. But it's not going to cause any wild pits when they play them live, but it's probably a good thing. I think St. Catherine's Wheel and Bully, they're the two biggest songs on the album for me, my two favourites. They've really got melodic death metal edges to them, which I really enjoy. It's got a fierce intensity, but there's a nice melodic edge, especially in the guitars. And again, yeah, Bully, that's definitely my favourite on the album. And it's the one I urge you to check out. Let's face it, the world is pretty crazy right now, and that's putting it pretty mildly. And I think Randy Blythe definitely doesn't pull any punches with his vocal delivery and the lyrics he chooses to provide this much needed social commentary. And I think Divides Destroy is probably the best example of that. I'll give some examples of the lyrics here. And let's face it, the band have got an absolute embarrassment of riches at their disposal in terms of access to studio, engineers, and they've been around for 25, nearly 30 years, so they know the sound inside out by now. And I find that really interesting because they recorded quite a lot of stuff at Mark Adler's home studio, especially the bass and the guitars. So yeah, this, I don't know, a little nerdy detail found quite interesting because again, the production is just, it feels quite rough and ready by design. It's not overly polished. Some bands can just suck the life out of things by trying to get a thing nice and perfect. But it feels very raw, very believable, and yeah, it's just a great production. So overall, Into Oblivion is everything you'd expect from a Lamb of God album, and that's kind of a good thing, but also raises another problem. I mean, where's the challenge to really try something different, and where's the challenge again to try and push themselves? But at the same time, bands nowadays, they can be crucified just for even possibly thinking, just maybe even doing something slightly different from what they normally do. So I guess they're kind of damned if they do and damned if they don't. But again, it's just, if anything, that kind of sums up Lamb of God's consistency and staying true to their own creative vision, which they've definitely done on Into Oblivion. Not try to do anything too wacky or too crazy, but yeah, I guess we kind of made a point really about criticizing them for not really, um, challenging themselves. But I'm also praising them for, staying true to the guns. So I guess I can't really win. But I mean, I still have an attachment to some of their older stuff. When discovered when I was like 14, 15. So if I was gonna, introduce someone to the Lamb of God, I probably would point them towards that the older material. But at the same time, Into Oblivion would definitely be a good introduction to the band. I wouldn't have any reservations about, again, introducing someone to the band via Into Oblivion. Yeah, I mean, maybe they've gone over the creative peak now, but they've definitely not lost it. They're still going strong, and they're still kings of the world of metal, really, and they're not going to abdicate that throne or crown anytime soon.